All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for Silence the Shame's Mental Wellness Seminar, Keeping the Beat Lifestyle Management. Today, we have Ursula Davis here for your facilitator, and I'm going to turn it over to her to go ahead and get the seminar started. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Megan. Hello, hello, hello. Glad to have all of you here with us today. My name, as Megan said, is Ursula Davis, and I'm a trainer with Silence the Shame. And um, your time today is really valuable to us because we really feel like mental wellness is important. Besides being a trainer, I'm also a licensed professional counselor in private practice, and I do a lot of training around mental health literacy as well as wellness. And so, again, I welcome you as Silence the Shame presents to you the soundtrack of mental health. It's the first installment of the Workplace Wellness series to empower employees and companies to really prioritize their mental well-being. And this series is sponsored by Sony Music Publishing Group through their Global Social Justice Fund. And they want to recognize that mental health disparities need to be lessened. And they also want to emphasize the impact that mental illness has on our lives. So today, we're going to explore lifestyle management strategies. And we want you to be able to, with this information, stay on track at work, at home, as well as in your personal life. But before we get started, I want to tell you a little bit about this organization. Silence the Shame is a nonprofit founded by music executive veteran Shanti Das. Due to the loss of her father and other close friends to suicide, she shares her story of depression and suicide ideation to peel back the layers of shame and access professional help. As a result, Silence the Shame was formed to eliminate mental health stigma, reduce health disparities, and improve rates of suicide among many of our marginalized populations, such as communities of color, older adults, children, and more. So let's take a moment for me to bring you into the room. One of the things that is really helpful for our mental wellness and to combat stress is to journal. So what I want you to do for me is just take a moment, kind of plant your feet, and I want you to take a deep cleansing breath. And so what that breath is going to do is kind of help you to refocus and realign. So you're going to take a deep breath in, inhaling where your stomach kind of goes in and sinks to the back of your back, and then your chest rises up, and you're going to hold that for a count of 4. Then you're going to exhale, your stomach will go back down, go back out, and your chest will go down, and you're going to do that for a count of 8. So 3, 2, 1, inhale, exhale. Make a note of how your body feels. And then take some time, if you have a pen and paper nearby, to write down what is your feeling in this moment. That's how simple journaling is. It's one of the great things about how we're able to kind of figure out in that moment what's going on. We're checking in with ourselves and we're ensuring that we're getting what we need. And journaling is a really, really good way to deal with stress management. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? We already said we're kind of looking at some of these strategies to deal with the transitions that we have in our life. This discussion will provide an overview of the significant life events that many of us either have gone through, are going through, or will go through in the future, and how they impact our mental health. Then we're going to explore transitioning to adulthood, being a caregiver, career changes, retirement, and grief and loss. And then finally, we'll hear from some of our experts and learn some tips to prepare for transition periods. We're going to learn some research-based information that's related to mental and physical health. In addition, we'll also watch and hear some short videos. So we have two types of videos. Our mentaludes are people who have personal experiences, and they're going to share those with you. And then we have Heal from the Experts, which are subject matter experts who are really kind of giving you some information that you can take with you. If at any time you have a question or you want to make a comment, or I ask you for some information and you want to respond, please feel free to type it in the chat and Megan's going to read that out for me, or feel free to unmute yourself. Okay. So let's talk about life events. What kind of life events am I talking about when I say we all go through these transitions? Stressful life events are quantifiable. There are circumstances that maybe for me is an issue or a challenge, but for you may not be so much. They can be such things as conflicts that you're having, financial issues, social relations, your family, or some personal challenges, and of course, the dreaded health-related stressors that we go through, especially as we get older. Financial worries seem to be one of the most common causes of stress. And according to the American Psychological Association, 78% of Americans say money is a significant cause of stress. Give me your hands up if you can agree with that. You can either do your real hand, or you can use your little hand emoji in Zoom. And in addition, 25% of workers say that their job is their most significant stressor. And I'm sure many of you can identify with that as well. Your body reacts to stress by releasing hormones, and that process is known as the fight or flight reaction, or the stress response. And that happens in our brainstem. That's one of the first things that we're able to do as our brain is developing from birth to adulthood. These hormones make your brain more alert, cause your muscles to tense, and increase your pulse. In the short term, these reactions are good because they can help you to handle a situation that's causing stress. It's your body's way of protecting itself. So for example, if a tiger were to walk into this room right now, you all may not see it, but what you will see is my face may get into some type of position. You'll probably see me tense up, get up, and run away. So if I get up and run, you know something's going on. But hopefully that's not going to happen. So again, our bodies are geared to protect us. So however chronic stress, we might have, thinking about if it's just that one-off thing, we've got that response. But if we're having those stressors happening over and over, it can worsen our mental health challenges and cause chronic illnesses. And that could be heart disease, stroke, or even type 2 diabetes. So it's really important to understand that connection. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So it's essential. You need to recognize how you respond to stress and how you manage your mental as well as your physical health, okay? So let's talk about these transitions a little more in depth. Think about for a second, what is a life transition? And if you like, put it in the chat for me. I'll give you about a minute to do that. What is a life transition? Do we have anything, Megan?
No, not yet.
Okay, well then we'll keep going. Feel free to still put that in the chat. A life transition is any change or adjustment that impacts your life in a significant way. We all experience transitions. Some are big, some are smaller, some are planned, some are unplanned. But transitions happen. They may be centered around something exciting, such as you started a new job, or you had an addition to your family, whether it be a birth or a marriage. However, they can be distressing as well, losing a loved one or the onset of a pandemic. So our first Healing from the Expert video, we're going to hear from Dr. Shonda Reynolds. Dr. Shonda is a licensed clinical psychologist and founder of Minds of the Culture. She discusses what transitions can look like for young adults and the varying issues that they navigate during this phase in their life. So let's listen to what Dr. Shonda has to say.
Yeah, it's been so hard. It's been very difficult. Any life cycle transition that we're talking about here is going to be difficult for anybody, right? And so when I mean the life cycle transitions, we have like infancy, toddlers, going into childhood, puberty, and then we have the adolescents going into the adulthood. And so when we're speaking of that specific transition, we're talking about individuals having to come into their own and learn how to function independently. And that might look like having to understand like finances and how to manage that, how to budget, how to navigate through career, education, relationships, and all those different things. And I would say those are like those bigger challenges because we never really had to deal with that in those earlier stages on an independent level. Any early adult who's going through these early life cycle stages, like we're going to have those general fears related to trying to figure things out, fear related to like, am I right career choice? Am I right career move? Is this the end for me? Like in terms of career, is this, am I managing my finances correctly? Should I be investing in a house right now? Right. So trying to navigate those different things can be stressful for anybody, and factoring in family stuff and factoring in what's going on in the country.
Definitely, definitely. I think we can all identify with some of those transitions that she spoke about. Early adulthood, it's a time of significant changes. And so when you're in that stage of 17, 18, maybe to 24, 25, those life stages and changes can be hard to manage. Transitioning from adolescence to adulthood, it comes with expectations to take responsibility, make independent decisions, and become self-sufficient. And let's face it, adulting is hard. Many people think it's a scam. We can't wait as children to be adults and do our own thing and make money. And then we get to adulthood and bam, there it is. It's not what we thought it would be. So recent research has found that adults and young adults have different brain functioning. So with young adult brains, the connections between the emotions and the part of the brain that makes decision making are still developing and not at the same rate. And so what that means is that for young adults, they feel more than they think. Think about that. They feel more than they think. Adults, on the other hand, they utilize their prefrontal cortex, and that's the part of the brain that is rational. It typically fully develops around 25, even though I've seen a couple of people where maybe it's more like 27, 28. They're still working on it. And so that part of the brain responds to situations with good judgment and awareness and thinking about long-term consequences. So during this period, young people contend with multiple opportunities and challenges that can affect their life. Decisions regarding education, employment, residential, marriage, and parenthood. Those are the things that determine individual developmental pathways for them. And yet, their brain doesn't really have the capacity to make what we would consider rational decisions. So it's important to note that also during this time, there are some mental health challenges that can also develop, like schizophrenia, major depressive disorder, and bipolar disorder. Those all can develop in early adulthood. And these conditions are at greater risk of being developed depending on family history, childhood experiences, and other social determinants of health. Now let's take a moment to hear from Trayvon Williams. He's a music executive who shares his mental health experiences as he transitioned into adulthood.
I think one of the biggest obstacles of my life was the transition from college to the real world, you know. My senior year of college, I'm looking at a lot of my friends and different colleagues and seeing them enter into the workforce, going into post-grad programs. And, you know, for me, I didn't have the internships. I didn't have a job lined up, you know. Fortunately, there was an opportunity for me to go to law school. And the goal for me was to go to law school and be an entertainment attorney. However, a couple of months when I started my law school journey, and the obstacle presented itself. And the obstacle was I wasn't able to return back. And that was it took me to a very low point in my life. It took me to a point where I thought that, you know, my career was over with, my journey was over with. I'd never stepped foot into the music industry, which is where I've always wanted to be. And I sat down for a few months, but I sat down to take time to re-strategize and refocus, you know? And during that period, you know, I did things like I fasted, I meditated, I prayed, I studied, I reached out to people and just learned and just became a student and really understood where my purpose was. This was a moment where I could understand. I actually learned where my purpose was, you know? So it's a gift and a curse. The curse was that I had to hold that burden, but the gift is that I came out so much stronger.
I'm sure many of you could identify with Trayvon's journey, but remember, understanding that as you go through those tough times, that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and he has been successful. So we're going to move from talking about that transition from young adulthood to adulthood into what often comes next, and sometimes while we're still in that young adult stage, and that's being a caregiver. So being a parent and managing expectations at home and work, they can create or sustain chronic stress. According to a 2018 Pew Research Center study, 3 in 10 US adults, that's 29%, have a child younger than 18 at home. And then 12% of those parents provide unpaid care for an adult. Being an aging parent's caregiver can create a lot of burnout and depression when stress is not managed effectively. Raising a child, it can be filled with a lot of joy. You have that satisfaction of those little ones learning and growing and becoming more independent. But then on the other hand, caring for your parents often involves feelings of sadness or even denial as they lose their abilities and require an increasing amount of assistance from you. So caring for a loved one with a disability or a chronic health condition, whether that be a child or an adult, combining personal caregiving and everyday needs, all of that can be very challenging. And unfortunately, many people in the workplace, they might not be aware of what you have going on and what your responsibilities are outside of that environment. And that can increase stress when you're given additional responsibilities or when there's a lack of flexibility, when maybe you need to be off. Adults in the sandwich generation have children at home or older kids who may be fresh out of the nest but still require support. And more young people are in that space because, as we just heard, it's hard to adult. And they also may have an elderly parent with increasing care needs. So let's hear from music industry professional Shawnee McCapp on balancing those types of challenges.
Recently, I was pregnant, a caregiver, and working in the music industry, and managing it was very, very hard. Especially remembering to also take care of myself as well. Managing it, to be honest, I didn't do a very good job a lot of times. I had to be reminded to, hey, take a nap, or hey, take a shower. My goodness, it was super hard. But I think what helped is my maternity leave and being able to have that isolated time away from work to take care of myself. And even if it was not as much as I should have been doing, it was more than I would have been able to do had I been working. And so now I'm back in the workforce. I have a newborn. I'm still a caregiver, and I'm still working in the music industry. And it's taking a lot of, again, setting boundaries, scheduling time for everybody, including myself, and taking those mental health breaks. So what does that look like? I'm working from home because of COVID, so I'm gonna go outside and take the baby for a walk. Maybe I'll go for drinks with a friend. Being able to get out of the house has really, really helped me to kind of blow some steam off from all those roles that I'm playing while I'm at home.
Wow, that's a lot. So if you feel like you are part of that sandwich generation that she just spoke of, just drop the word sandwich in the chat, okay? So whether starting a new job, entering your field, or changing your career even, stress does play a significant role in that adjustment. Mental health stressors certainly existed in employment before March of 2020, when everything changed for us. However, the pandemic completely changed employer expectations, and it also added additional work issues. Burnout reaction to chronic work-related stress, it creates a state of physical and or emotional exhaustion. And that involves feelings of reduced accomplishment and loss of personal identity. Some of the signs that you might want to look at in terms of, ooh, is this happening to me? Is some gastrointestinal problems. Your stomach is really bothering you. Maybe high blood pressure, poor immune function. Maybe you're getting headaches on a regular basis. Your sleep or your concentration is being impacted, or maybe you're having feelings of worthlessness or deep sadness or depression or loss of interest in doing things that previously brought you pleasure. And there also may be some thoughts of suicide. And so looking out for those signs and those symptoms are really important. Are you having a burnout reaction to everything going on in the workplace, as well as all the other responsibilities that you have being a part of that sandwich generation? Imposter syndrome is a severe form of self-doubt, and it's feeling like you're a fraud. And many young adults and adults have that experience. It's not actually a mental health condition, but the experience disproportionately affects high-achieving people. They find it difficult to accept their own accomplishments, and many question whether they really deserve the accolades that they get. And of course they do. Of course they do. Definitely for women of color, exclusion worsens that self-doubt and the lack of belongingness in corporate workplaces. So thinking about your imposter syndrome and how you're kind of working to do all the different things and address all the different aspects of your life, being sure to recognize the accomplishments that you're making and take time to take care of yourself. So now we're going to move on to another area in our life in terms of how our health and that transition from healthy maybe to unhealthy then impacts our mental health. The challenges that we experience as we're aging includes a variety of problems. It seems like as soon as you hit maybe 40, things start hurting that weren't hurting before, things aren't moving the way they were before, and many conditions that are preventable and maintained with regular health care, you didn't have to do those things before. Older adults are disproportionately affected by chronic conditions such as diabetes, arthritis, and heart disease. And we kind of talked about that earlier. 80% have at least one chronic condition, and nearly 70% of Medicare beneficiaries have 2 or more chronic conditions. That's a lot. That's a lot. And the fact that we are living longer means we have more opportunity for our bodies to start not acting right and developing those chronic conditions. Mind and body are affected by physiological and emotional changes, as well as social factors. Remember that financial issues is a #1 stressor. So income, housing, those are the types of things that really, really impact us physically as well as emotionally. People with severe mental illness are at higher risk of experiencing a wide range of chronic physical conditions. And then conversely, people living with chronic physical health conditions, they experience a lot of depression and anxiety, twice the rate of the general population. So when you think about maybe someone with cancer may oftentimes have depression, or someone who's been diagnosed with schizophrenia may often have diabetes. And then those that suffer from chronic pain, which seems to be increasing with time, that they have physical and behavioral health challenges. So all of these things, all of these chronic illnesses, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, they increase the likelihood of developing a mental health condition. And that might be hard for a person to adapt to and cope with those changes and ongoing treatment that might come with such a diagnosis. So for example, stress might stem from facing new limits on what you're able to do. You can't walk upstairs like you did, or you can't, take those long walks that you used to. Or you might be feeling stressed or concerned about treatment outcomes. What if this particular treatment doesn't work? And what's going to happen to you in the future? So our health, our mental health, and our physical health kind of interact together, and they are definitely fundamentally linked. So this next phase is a phase that I am emerging myself into as I try to make kind of decisions going forward in my own life. So I'm now at the age where I can retire. Could have retired last year. I said last week, but last year. And so thinking about retiring, it can be a reward for years of hard work. And I have worked hard for years. However, it still represents a significant life event. Retirement highlights your psychological aging, the capacity to adapt to those inner body biological changes that we just talked about, and then changes in the external environment, which also can affect our mental health. Yet very few people consider the psychological adjustments that accompany this life stage. Those can include coping with the loss of your career identity. You were once the CEO, or you had thousands of people that you supervised. You brought in thousands and hundreds and thousands, maybe millions of dollars in business, and now you watch TV all day. And so your identity may really be tied to that career. Replacing support networks that you had through work, that's the easiest place to have those supportive networks, those people that you spend most of your time with. Spending more time than ever with your spouse. Maybe that idea does not make you smile. Or finding new and engaging ways to stay active. Kind of thinking about, now what do I do? So early research on retirement transition has primarily focused on the financial conditions. How am I going to continue to pay for healthcare? How am I going to save enough money? Or how will I maintain a livable income stream? However, retiring can also trigger stress, anxiety, and depression. In addition, some studies have linked retirement to a decline in health. Retiring is a mental process. It's a mental process I'm going through now. And to be mindful of this process and the stages of retirement makes you more mentally prepared. You're going from a 40 plus hours of working life to having unstructured freedom in a transition that doesn't happen overnight. And it's that level of, or that lack of structure that really, really tends to kind of throw people into a tailspin. So even though you're thinking, oh, I can't wait to retire, you don't think about, and then or so I can. And so what do I do now? So the next life transition that I want to talk with you about is grief. And you may grieve that working life if you do decide to retire. You may grieve that, interaction and that being able to get up and dress up and look a certain way and do a certain thing and having a very structured purpose in life. Grief is natural. And it's a personal response to actual as well as symbolic losses. It's the emotional suffering that you feel when something or someone you love is taken away. Some examples of loss are here on the screen, but they include maybe loss of a loved one due to death or a pet, the end of relationships, job loss, loss through theft, or loss of independence through disability. Whatever the loss, it's unique to you. So please don't feel ashamed about how you feel or believe that it's only appropriate to grieve for certain things. So for example, if a person, an animal, a relationship, or a situation was significant to you, it's normal to grieve that loss that you're experiencing. And that's what people often forget. Grief is very personal. It's not neat. It's not linear, and it doesn't follow timelines or schedules. You might cry sometimes, you might become angry or withdraw, or you may feel empty. And none of those things are unusual and definitely are not wrong. Everyone grieves differently, but there are some commonalities in the stages of grief and the order of feelings that we're experiencing during that grief. So let's talk about those for a moment. So these are the most common stages of grief. But again, understanding that it is a personal process, and you might cycle through them either in this order or some other way. But they still are typically denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And these phases are attempts for us to process change, self-preservation, and adapting to this new reality and change in our life. So denial, it's very common. It's a defense mechanism that we use. And in terms of grief and loss, denying it gives you the time to absorb and process the news more gradually. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing, even though it does worry the people around us because they want you to face what's going on. Anger seems to be like the first emotion that we feel when we start to release related to loss. And then bargaining is a phase of grief that kind of helps you hold on to hope in that intense pain. Typical grief reactions, they really involve mental, physical, social, and emotional responses. And these reactions can include numbness, anger, guilt, anxiety, sadness, or despair. In addition, the individual can experience difficulty concentrating, sleeping, or eating. They might have a loss of interest in pleasurable activities, physical issues, or even illness. Sound familiar? Then you have that reconstruction. At some point, your supervisor expects you to come back to work. You still have to make dinner for your family. You still have to pick the kids up from school or take them to their extracurricular activities. And so restructuring is getting back into those routines that you need to do. And sometimes those routines are new. So development of maybe new routines based on that loss. And then finally, acceptance is an understanding that there is finality to what's happened. It's acknowledging the loss, adapting to the new experience, and moving forward. Accepting a loss does not mean that you got over it. But given the complexities of the process, you really can never return to the you that existed prior to the loss. It's a new you. It's a new situation. It's a new life in many types of processes, depending on the loss. And so you have to figure out which one works best for you. And how do we do that? So that's what we're going to talk about. So thinking about these lifestyle management strategies that are necessary to make it through not only these transitions, but also just stressful times in your life. Those are the things that we want to really do. Stress affects everyone from time to time, and not all stress is harmful. Having a little bit of stress, like a little salt and pepper, is okay. It helps you to build your resilience and to get through those tough times. And it lets you know, oh, well, if I did it before, I can do it again. However, high levels of stress over time can negatively affect your mental and your physical health. You are the best expert about your self-care. You know what things you enjoy, you know what things bring you joy. And so you have to form those healthy habits and make positive changes to your daily routines to improve your emotional and your physical health. It's definitely on you. Self-care includes reducing and managing your stress, maintaining a healthy lifestyle through your diet and or exercise, and then educating yourself about any health concerns that you might have or illnesses that maybe you've been diagnosed with. The more you take that active role in helping yourself and making positive improvements in your lifestyle, the better your chances are of feeling better and staying well. And that's what you want to do. So educate yourself. Find out about your health circumstances. You can do that by talking to your health professional, learning from others, maybe who've had similar experiences, and then reading self-help books, articles, listening to podcasts. All of those are ways in which you can learn more about your physical health, and you can do something about it. Now, how many of you, show of hands, get enough sleep? Just raise your hand. I can't see you, but I bet you there aren't many hands raised. Lack of sleep is dangerous to your brain and your body health. Sleep, it's an off switch. It's what we need for our bodies to reset. So establish a sleep pattern. In addition, you want your regular physical activities, such as some walking, a little running maybe. I don't do running, but walking fast, I love it, or playing sports. All those things can improve your mood. They distract you from your worries, they relieve your tension, they relieve your stress. And so having a healthy dose of those things, some good sleep, as well as some good activity, and then lastly, nutrition. Those are the things necessary for your mental well-being. Healthy meals, they boost your energy, they boost your mood and your overall wellness. So regularly, making sure that you have at least one really good meal that incorporates all those food groups. Food is fuel, and so it gives you that energy to keep going. Lastly, you need some relaxation. Earlier, when we started at the top of the hour, I asked you all to do a little deep breathing. So you can do that. You can do some progressive muscle relaxation, a little meditation, some Tai Chi, yoga. All of those things help to ease anxiety and stress. They also lower your blood pressure, and they can improve overall well-being. So that really is the recipe to improving your physical as well as your mental health. So thinking about how we do that, I know you all have heard about work-life balance. And so we don't want to think about work-life balance. We're not calling it that. We don't think that's the best thing. Research has shown us that overwork, it isn't good. It's not good for employees. It's not good for employers. And so what do you do about that? If you overcome unhealthy work habits, then you have a more sustainable work-life rhythm. So instead of work-life balance, we want work-life rhythm, okay? So work-life rhythm, it means that you're adapting to the ebbs and the flows of your life instead of trying to make everything uniform and balanced, because that is difficult. There are times when we need to really run fast and do a lot of things and multitask. And then there are times where we need to slow down and we need to be still. So work-life rhythm, that's our new mantra. Work-life integrity is about who you are at work. When you're true to yourselves at work, there is a sense of peace that comes with that. But on the other hand, When there's a conflict with our core values, no matter how much we achieve, our work will lack meaning and satisfaction, and our life will feel out of balance. So if you're ever asked to do something within your job that you just, internally don't agree with, that causes a lot of stress. So it's essential to reflect on your role at work, and then how can you set healthy boundaries? What are those things that you can say no to? And do you? And will you? Those things are really important. The quality of our life at work, it really does matter. Those hours that we're there, that's not the only way to measure how we're consuming our work. Work can be just, whether we worked 3 hours or whether we worked 103 hours, it really, really can have a serious impact on us. Conflict, complex relationships, maybe lack of appreciation or lack of connection or community within the organizations in which you work, uncertainty, stress, being constantly under pressure, those are all things that contribute to low quality of life at work. And that takes far more out of us than the time spent in a positive, productive environment, which is what we all want to strive for. So definitely focus on, if you are still in the workplace, you haven't gotten to that retirement stage yet, thinking about your work-life rhythm. Okay, and so now let's kind of start talking about what are some things outside of our work that we can do to help. And with all of these transitions that we're going through. And the biggest thing that I can say is prepare, prepare, prepare. The transitions are coming. And most of these transitions that we talked about today are ones that you have either gone through, are going through now, or you will go through. So prepare when possible. Prepare for these transitional periods in your life. Prepare for that career shift, becoming a caregiver, or being diagnosed with a health condition. Then you want to outline a plan and set a helpful or growth mindset, meaning, okay, this is going to happen, so this is what I will do when and if it does. Set some reasonable expectations. Unmet expectations can create frustration and stress. So if you expect that watching other parents prepares you for parenting, and then it doesn't work out that way, then you are completely disappointed. Instead, you want to try to set a reasonable expectation. Parenting is probably going to be stressful, and at sometimes I'm going to feel overwhelmed. That is reasonable. That's a reasonable expectation, and it will happen. And so it's also helpful to remember that feeling stressed during transitions is normal. You cannot avoid it, and you shouldn't try. Trying to avoid it, that is also very stressful. Set small goals. Take one thing at a time. Ask yourself, what's that one small thing that I can do right now to prepare for this transition? And that might be contacting a realtor around, a new place to live, or scheduling a doctor's appointment, or responding to a text from a friend. That social support is really critical during times of transition. Chatting with a family member or a friend, that can be a way to help you with the way that you're feeling and to make you less lonely. So you want to practice your self-compassion. Change is difficult. Nobody likes change. Change is also inevitable. It's the one thing that we can rely on, is that things will change. And so that reality says to us that you aren't always going to navigate your life transitions in a perfect way. And that's okay. You prepare as much as you can. You check your self-talk, be the glass half full instead of empty. And you think about, what are the types of things that you're saying to yourself? A way to develop a beneficial self-talk is to recall, what are some transitions that I've had in the past that maybe were difficult situations, but I successfully coped with them. Remember what it is that you did to manage those things, and then break out of your imposter syndrome. You did it before, you're great, you can do it again. You have to learn to accept the achievements that you've had and recognize that you are worthy of them. Retirement, how do we plan for that? So thinking about if you plan early for your exit. So for example, if you know you're going to retire by the end of the year, right now is probably the time that you want to let your HR department know, find out what are the steps that they expect you to do. They usually have some kind of a checklist of things that they want you to do. Now is the time to do that. And so really planning those things out so that you know. Start talking to your financial planner, looking at your different accounts, looking at the retirement monies that you've put aside. What can I do with those things now? How is that going to impact me come the end of the year? Find a new purpose. If you've always wanted to volunteer at the Boys and Girls Club, but you couldn't because of your work schedule, now's the time to do it. Seek out support. How can you find some like-minded people? You like to knit in your spare time? There's a whole knitting club that you could be a part of. Practice some of that stress management that we talked about. Take up yoga or Tai Chi in the park. Manage your health. Go ahead and have that physical and find out all the things that you're going to need to have in place so that you can plan the type of insurance coverage, that you're going to need. And of course, as I continue to say, you want to embrace the change that is coming. I don't have to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning anymore. That's a wonderful thing. It really is. As long as you know, okay, so what time will you get up and what will you do? If you have that planned out, it's a little easier for you to do. And then lastly, one of the transitions we talked about, of course, was grief and loss. And so thinking about grief and loss from a recovery standpoint, recovery from grief, it's achieved by a series of small and connected choices that are made by the griever. Most of us, we haven't been given the necessary information to make correct choices in response to a loss. Recovering from a significant emotional loss is not an easy task, but we can take those actions that lead to recovery and require our attention. And that's open-mindedness, willingness, and courage. Recovery is acknowledging that it's all right to feel sad from time to time and talking about those feelings, no matter how those around us react. I often hear people say, I didn't want to burden someone by letting them know that I was feeling, some kind of way, or I was in a mood and remembering someone that I lost or something that I lost. You may also feel a sense of guilt because you're grieving over a loss that doesn't seem really important to other people or isn't as important than maybe loss of life. However, grief, as we talked about earlier, it's a universal emotion. There's no right or wrong way to experience it. No one can tell you what thing should be important to you because all losses are significant. And if you're experiencing intense grief or you feel unsure about coping, reach out for help. That can provide you comfort and support. You can call a crisis hotline, such as the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 988, or you can text silence to the crisis text line at 741-741. And don't worry, we'll provide that information to you at the end of the seminar today. So now let's hear from our last expert. This is Ms. Kate Atwood, and she's a creator, entrepreneur, and community leader. At 23, Kate founded Kate's Club, a nationally acclaimed nonprofit based in Atlanta that provides support to children and teens who are facing life after the death of a parent or a sibling. Kate describes how she uses her grief to grow. To learn more about Kate Atwood, you can visit her website at www.kateatwood.com.
I am a grieving human. I will always be. But for me, that allows me to connect, that allows me to grow, that allows me to understand love. I always say sadness is what is required for the joy that is desired. You cannot experience or know true joy if you do not truly experience and feel sadness. So I'm just starting this new movement that grief is growth, and really just
love that.
helping to change our mindset from a fundamental level to not be afraid of grief, to not feel that we have to, walk through life with pushing it aside, because we will not
Amen.
win. We just will not win, and so many conversations around depression and look, we definitely see those outcomes in our society, and they're the highest that they've ever been. Suicide, drug abuse, violence, all this stuff is the high, it's never been so bad. So it's like, when do we start to say, okay, well, we actually can get to the root of this, and all hope is not lost. If we change our mindset around how we accept and face grief.
Definitely, Kate. I think we all agree. Grief, it really can be growth. And so thinking about that transition regarding grief and loss, when you grieve or you lose a loved one, and it's a loved one, maybe that's a spouse or a parent, and so now you're kind of faced with having to do everything on your own, that can really provide a financial stressor. And as we discussed earlier, financial stress is a number one stressor that people indicate and identify on an ongoing basis. And so when you think about financial resilience, it's the ability to withstand the events that impact one's income and their assets. And some financially stressful events like unemployment, divorce, disability, and health problems, they really affect people on an individual as well as a family level. Being financially healthy, it means being economically secure enough to handle both your expected and your unexpected expenses. So it would not be appropriate to talk about such a stressor as being number one. I've talked about it during the whole hour, and not really help you to think about, how do you combat that? What are some things you can do? So a financially healthy person, they can afford to pay for their essential bills, they have ample savings for an emergency, and they can afford their debt obligations. So if you're concerned about, or you want to improve your financial health, which then impacts your mental health, which then impacts your physical health, these are some things that you can do. You want to keep track of all your spending. Even your small expenses can build over time. So list those debts, include your past due bills, your late fees, even list the minimum payments due. And then if you owe any money to family or friends, don't forget to include that. If you have any debt, you want to develop a plan to eliminate it. Sometimes maybe like the snowball effect can work. You want to start with your credit cards, and y'all know starting August 31st, or I guess September 1st, we're back to having to pay down on our student loans. Cut down on your high expense items by prioritizing the things that you actually need. And then maintain some discipline and allow for financial freedom long term. Always save for an emergency fund to cover 3 to 6 months of living expenses. I know that's a lot. It takes some time. Remember, you want to do one small thing at a time, and you can build up on that. And in addition, emergencies should be limited to significant life disruptions and immediate needs. So if you lose your job, if you all of a sudden have a large medical expense, maybe a home or a car repair, which is usually expensive, or a child or pet care. Maybe your child is ill, or your pet has to have something done. Or you might have some technology needs, like your computer just all of a sudden dies, and it is what you need to do your work or schoolwork. And so having multiple streams of income, that's also one way to protect yourself financially and grow your income over time. Remember, we were talking about knitting. So you like to knit. Okay, you might be someone that knits. I've seen someone knit purses, and she makes a lot of money off of that. So thinking about what are the talents or the things that you love to do that you also can utilize. Financial problems tend to impact the whole family, and enlisting your loved ones to support you, that's really critical. helping you, it helps you to be accountable, as well as it kind of brings them in to kind of give you some suggestions on what can I do to get into a better financially healthy space in my life. So these are some resources. Resources are always good. So as we're starting to close up, we've got about 5 minutes left. If you or someone you know is experiencing severe or distressing symptoms and they've lasted 2 or more weeks, we really don't want you to wait. We want you to get help for yourself or for that individual as soon as possible. Don't wait until those symptoms are overwhelming. Discuss your concerns maybe with your primary care physician, or, you know, if someone else refers you to a mental health specialist, you can do that. Mental health services may be available to you through your health insurance plan or through your job, like EAP, which is short-term services and benefits that can really focus in on what's going on with you right now and help you to get out of what may be a crisis. There's mental health advocacy and education organizations who provide direct support to families and organizations with mental health or individuals with mental health issues. And then there's also our national and federal organizations that provide so many resources, like SAMHSA, the American Psychiatric Association, the American Counseling Association, the National Institute of Mental Health, and CDC, which is right here in Georgia. And so don't worry, don't try to, you know, take a screenshot or take a picture. We're going to provide all of these resources to you at the end. So we want you to stay in contact with us. And so how do you do that? You can visit us at our Silence the Shame podcast, which you can find on YouTube, our Silence the Shame website, www.silencetheshame.com, Silence the Shame TV, which again, that is on YouTube. So many different ways, but we definitely want you to keep in contact and get those resources that are available to you. So as we are closing up today, I definitely want to give you all an opportunity. If anyone has any questions, you can put it in the chat. I see something in the chat, so I'm not sure if those are questions, statements. Someone was raising their hand, I don't know.
Hey, Ursula, it was just someone making a comment that it's been extremely informative and definitely some great reminders for the audience as well.
Okay, thank you, thank you. We really want to thank all of you for attending today's seminar, and we hope that it did provide some insight for you and encourages you to learn more about mental health and wellness. The audio and the video content can be found on Silence the Shame TV, again, which is on YouTube, as well as the podcast on several listening platforms. You will be asked to complete an evaluation, of course, to provide feedback on the seminar and to measure the literacy that you gained from it. Once the evaluation is completed, you'll be provided a certificate of attendance. And in addition, you're going to receive a digital companion guide, and that will offer you some tips, some of the ones that we discussed today, as well as many of the resources that you saw or I talked about throughout the seminar. Okay. So if there are no other questions or comments, again, thank you and enjoy the rest of your evening.